They say every storm passes, but no one tells you how long you'll have to stand alone in the rain. Tonight, as lightning splits the Boston sky and sirens wail in the distance, Megan Harper faces her hardest hour. 36 weeks pregnant, abandoned, and trapped in a hospital where every shadow holds a memory she can't escape. With only a cheap hope necklace for comfort and a world that keeps closing its doors, Megan must summon the strength to fight through pain, fear, and the echoes of love lost. But what if the person fate brings to her bedside is the last one she ever expected? Would you find hope in the eye of your own storm?
Just breathe.
Hit subscribe and join Megan as one impossible night changes everything. Lightning crawled across the Boston skyline, a ragged white scar splitting the midnight clouds. Megan Harper pressed her forehead to the cold glass of the hospital's 6th-floor window, watching rain slam against the city and pool in neon-lit puddles below. The air inside felt thick, too quiet except for the sharp tick of the wall clock and the hum of emergency generators. Down the hall, a nurse hurried past, shoes squeaking, arms full of blankets and gauze, barely glancing into Megan's dim, cramped room. 36 weeks pregnant and alone at Boston Memorial. No partner, no family sitting anxiously in the plastic chairs, no hand to hold, just her and the pain. It rolled through her now in heavy, stubborn waves, each contraction a reminder that time didn't care if you were ready or not. Megan's breath trembled as she leaned back onto the pillow, one hand drifting to the silver chain at her neck. The Hope necklace, a delicate script, cheap silver but worn smooth from years of being fidgeted and thumbed. She'd found it tangled in the sheets the night Jack left, the same night the world she'd planned for split apart. She remembered, against her will, the way his shoes sounded on the old apartment floor, half running, half unsure. The slam of the door as he left. No argument, no apology, only a folded note and the necklace left behind, as if she could wear hope like armor. But hope didn't keep you warm at 3 a.m. when the world was silent except for your own heartbeat. Tonight, thunder shook the glass. Megan flinched, gritting her teeth, sweat slicking her forehead. The storm outside made everything more raw, every flash of light exposing her empty room, every rumble a drumbeat of fear in her chest. She tried to steady her breath, to count like the birthing class videos taught her, but the silence pressed in. Where was everyone? The nurses, she'd overheard, were stretched thin. Half the city's power was out. Laboring mothers, emergencies, old men coughing in the ER. She was just another room light blinking on the board. In the corner, Megan's battered canvas bag slumped on the chair. Baby onesies, a single pacifier, a folder of bills, all jammed together with a faded sonogram photo tucked inside. She squeezed her eyes shut, and for a moment, let herself remember a different version of tonight. A time when Jack was still beside her, hands warm on her belly, both of them dreaming names and futures as if nothing could break them. But everything broke. When she'd told him about the baby, his face shut down. Shock, anger, then a cold, practiced kindness she'd never seen before. He left her a note. No explanations, only, "You'll do great, Megan. You're strong. I can't do this." She tried, for weeks, to hate him. It was easier than grieving. But tonight, grief crept back. Not for him exactly, but for the empty seat by her bed, for the version of herself who believed love was unconditional. A knock on the door broke the spell. A nurse peeked in, rain-soaked hair stuck to her forehead. "Sorry, Miss Harper. We're still waiting on the on-call OB. Just keep breathing for me, okay?" Megan nodded, forcing a tight smile, clutching the thin sheet. The nurse lingered a second, as if about to say something more, but hurried off. Footsteps faded, and Megan listened to the storm. Her phone buzzed, her mother's number flashing across the screen. She didn't pick up. They hadn't spoken in months. "You made your choices, Meg," her mom had said when she'd called, voice sharp and tired. "You live with them now." Lightning flickered. Megan pressed her hand over her belly, feeling the baby shift, restless, as if picking up on her mother's fear. A contraction hit, sharper than before. Tears pricked her eyes but didn't fall. She was so tired, tired of fighting, of being strong because she had no one else to lean on. She counted her breaths. The city outside felt distant, another world of people tucked safe in their homes, while she balanced at the edge of something new and terrifying. The pain kept coming. She tried to focus on the necklace, on the word hope against her palm, on the future she had to believe in, a memory. Jack, years ago, fingers tracing the curve of her jaw as they played chess in a dusty cafe, sunlight streaming in. "No matter what happens, Meg, remember you're never alone." But she was. She had been for a long time. Thunder roared again. Somewhere in the hallway, a monitor beeped. A baby wailed down the corridor. A tiny, furious protest against the night. Megan breathed, slow and ragged. The storm outside kept going, merciless, and so did she. Time blurred. She drifted between pain and half-dreams, her old life flickering behind her eyes, new fear pressing in from every side. At some point, the lights flickered, then steadied. Another contraction built, almost doubling her over. The world narrowed to the rhythm of her own body, the taste of metal on her tongue, the image of the hope necklace glowing faintly in the sterile dark. She didn't know how long she lay there, fighting for air, for courage, for any scrap of comfort. The hospital was a maze of quiet chaos, overworked staff, alarms, shadows flickering on white walls. She wanted to call out, but something stubborn held her back. And then, as if the storm itself had decided to shift, the door opened again. New footsteps, steady, unhurried, but weighted with purpose. But for now, Megan faced the night alone, hope at her throat, and the storm refusing to let up. In the heavy hush between contractions, Megan stared at the faded water stains on the ceiling tiles, searching for shapes. Birds, a crooked star, anything to hold her mind steady. The storm still battered the glass. Sometimes thunder made the IV pole shiver. She pressed her lips together, closed her eyes, and let the memory of another, softer rain carry her somewhere else. She'd loved Boston in the fall. Back when she and Jack had shared a one-bedroom on Cambridge Street, everything was golden. Sun on red leaves, his jacket around her shoulders on cold mornings, the tiny thrift store chess set that always sat half-played on their kitchen table. Jack's laugh would drift through the apartment, full and careless, the kind of sound that made her believe for a while that love could outlast anything. But happiness, she realized now, wasn't armor. It was a window left open, rain seeping in when you weren't looking. The memory turned, sharp as a key in a lock, the day she told Jack about the baby. He came home early, the air crisp, his cheeks flushed with the wind. Megan had paced the living room, holding the test in both hands, rehearsing the words over and over. When she finally told him, the silence after stretched so long she thought time might crack. Jack didn't yell. He just stood there, eyes darting everywhere but her face. "A baby?" he said, as if the idea was foreign, something impossible. She tried to reach for him, but he stepped back, running his hands through his hair. "I'm not ready for this, Meg. I thought we... He never finished. Later that night, she found his note. It wasn't cruel, just final. You'll do great, Megan. You're strong. I can't do this. He left the hope necklace on her pillow. Some kind of apology, maybe. Some small wish that she'd still believe in things he couldn't give. A contraction gripped her, sharp and deep. Megan groaned, biting down on the edge of the blanket. The room wavered, a gray tide rolling over her. She wanted to call for help, but no voice came. Tears gathered at her temples, sliding into her hair. She remembered calling her mom, voice shaking. He left, Megan whispered. The silence on the other end was worse than yelling. Well, her mother said, sighing, I told you not to trust dreamers. This is your life now, Meg. You make it work. The words echoed now, hard as stone. A knock rattled her back. A different nurse peeked in, this one older, face drawn and lined. You're doing okay? The woman asked, her accent clipped and kind. Megan nodded, biting back the urge to spill everything. Her fear, her loneliness, the way hope sometimes felt like a cruel joke. The nurse adjusted her blankets, checked the monitor, left a cup of ice water on the table. You're strong, honey. Most are, when they have to be. As the door clicked shut, Megan glanced at the window. Her reflection stared back, hair wild, eyes bruised by sleepless nights. She tried to see herself as the nurse did, capable, brave, but mostly she saw the cracks, the missed mortgage payments, the student loan letters piling up on her dresser, the baby clothes folded tight to save space, each one a tiny promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Another contraction, longer this time. Megan breathed through it, jaw clenched, counting seconds. For a moment she almost gave in, almost let herself cry, call Jack's number, beg him to come. But pride burned hotter than fear. Still, the doubt gnawed at her. What if the baby came too soon? What if something went wrong and she was all alone? The last thing her child heard a stranger's voice and not her own. Panic threatened to unravel her, each worry stacking on the next. The lights flickered. Megan gripped the necklace, the metal warm now from her skin. She thought of all the women before her, her grandmother who raised 4 boys after the war, her own mother piecing together a life after Megan's father disappeared. Maybe strength was something inherited, passed down like an heirloom, shining brightest when everything else fell apart. She let the memory of music soothe her, a habit from childhood, counting heartbeats in time with imaginary piano keys. In her mind, she played Chopin, soft and slow. Each note another breath survived. She pictured her daughter's tiny fist curling around her finger, a promise that maybe, just maybe, she could be enough. Another voice in the hallway, male, low, a hint of urgency in the words. Megan blinked, fighting the pain, straining to listen. The world shrank to the glow of the bedside lamp, the storm's distant fury, and the ache of what was gone. And yet, in the middle of it all, a quiet stubbornness took root. She wasn't done. Not yet. A shadow moved behind the frosted glass of her door. Footsteps paused. Something about them, steady, unfamiliar, made her sit up. Nerves tingling, as if fate was drawing closer, reshaping her night in ways she could never have imagined. For a few minutes, Megan drifted in and out, half swallowed by pain, half lulled by the rain's rhythm on the glass. Then the voices outside her door sharpened, footsteps shuffling, a soft click as her door finally swung open. She looked up, expecting another nurse or maybe the harried resident who'd poked in earlier. Instead, a tall man entered, crisp scrubs under a rain-damp jacket, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. He stopped short when their eyes met. The fluorescent light etched tired lines into his face, but his gaze was quick, searching, and for a beat, wide with surprise. "Miss Harper?" His voice was steady, practiced, but then something flickered across his face, recognition cutting through the hospital's routine. Megan blinked hard, fighting a wave of confusion. That voice, that jawline, softened only slightly with age. She stared, heartbeat tripping. It couldn't be. "Ethan," she said, barely above a whisper, each syllable weighed down by the years in between. He stood frozen, one hand on his stethoscope, eyes locked on hers. "Megan?" For a moment, the sterile hospital room faded, and they were back in another place. Sun-drenched campus lawns, late-night study sessions, the heady rush of first love. The memory made her insides twist. It had been over a decade since she'd seen him. The last time she'd left him behind, choosing a concert hall over a future together. Ethan's gaze dropped to her swollen belly, then to the pain etched across her face. The old Ethan, gentle, careful, flashed through his eyes. "I'm the on-call OB tonight," he said, a little too stiffly, regaining his professional mask. There was an emergency with the regular attending. Megan tried to sit up straighter, gathering what composure she could. "Of course." "Lucky me," she managed, forcing a brittle smile. He stepped closer, checking her chart, his hands moving with the surety of experience. For a while, the room filled only with the quiet clicks of his pen, the hush of machines, the distant rumble of thunder. "Your contractions are close. How long have you been laboring?" he asked, voice gentle but clinical. She hesitated. "Since before midnight, I think." Her words quavered. "It's just been long." He nodded, listening, his expression softening. "You should have called someone sooner. This storm's made a mess of everything. Half the staff can't even get here." She shrugged, biting the inside of her cheek. Didn't have anyone to call. That truth hung in the air, heavy as the storm outside. Ethan looked at her, really looked. He opened his mouth, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, he checked her vitals, his hands gentle on her wrist, careful not to linger too long. Megan caught the subtle tension in his jaw, the sadness in his eyes he tried to hide. "I'll be with you through this, Megan," he said quietly. "You're not alone tonight." Her breath caught. She wanted to ask so many things. Did he remember how it felt when she left? How she'd tried to become someone new, someone bigger than their small dreams? Did he hate her for it? Or had he, like her, found comfort in the pieces they left behind? Another contraction rippled through her. She gripped the rails, breathing through the pain, Ethan murmuring words of encouragement. For a moment, she let herself lean into his presence, drawing strength from the familiar steadiness of his voice. The storm rattled the windows. In the flickering light, memories crowded in. Ethan helping her pack up her dorm, promising he'd wait. Both of them too young to imagine how messy life could get. The ache of that goodbye, their final argument, her stubbornness, his quiet heartbreak, pressed in with every surge of pain. "Still playing piano?" he asked softly, wiping sweat from her brow, the question almost shy. She shook her head. "Haven't touched a piano in over a year." Her throat closed around the rest. "Haven't really touched hope either." He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "I always liked listening to you play, even when you got mad at wrong notes." A tiny, breathless laugh escaped her, the first in months. The monitors beeped. Ethan's pager buzzed, an emergency elsewhere, but he silenced it. I'll stay until the baby's here, he said. You don't have to do this by yourself. There was so much she wanted to say, but words seemed too fragile. Instead, she closed her eyes, letting his presence fill the silent spaces Jack and her mother had left behind. As another contraction started, Megan felt something she hadn't in a long time. A sliver of comfort, the warmth of not being invisible, even if just for a night. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, something old and unfinished had returned, threading through the pain, a sense that maybe, despite everything, she could still be seen. The hospital lights flickered again, plunging the room into a brief hush, the monitors hiccuping in the darkness. The generator rumbled to life, bathing everything in a washed-out yellow that sharpened every shadow. Megan's breaths came short, broken up by waves of pain that rolled over her, each one longer and fiercer than the last. Ethan stood at her side, a pillar in the chaos, while nurses hurried in and out, their faces drawn tight by fatigue. Somewhere down the hallway, voices echoed, an urgent request for more IVs, a doctor's brisk orders. Megan gripped the rails of her bed, knuckles pale, sweat trickling down her temples. Her gown clung to her back. The air felt heavy, charged with the storm's wild energy. It was as if the entire city was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Another contraction built, relentless and deep. Megan squeezed her eyes shut, letting herself sink into memory as she tried to ride it out. She was 16 again, sitting on the wobbly piano bench in her childhood living room, practicing scales while her mother folded laundry nearby. "No shortcuts, Meg," her mother would say, never looking up from a towel. "The world doesn't owe you a thing." Megan had learned early how to swallow her pain, how to keep moving forward even when the music in her life fell out of tune. The pressure intensified, pulling her back to the present. A nurse, Anna, her name tag read, checked Megan's vitals with steady hands, murmuring encouragement. Megan barely heard her, eyes fixed on Ethan. He moved with a calm purpose, directing the team, but his face was lined with worry. Every so often he glanced at Megan, searching for something he couldn't name. Thunder crashed overhead. The lights dimmed once more. This time a sharp alarm sounded, one of the monitors blinking red, casting frantic shadows on the wall. Anna cursed softly under her breath. Ethan stepped forward, quick and sure. "We're losing main power in this wing," he told the team. "Switch to manual monitoring and keep her calm." "Try me," Megan whispered, lips twitching in a wry half-smile, though her voice shook. Another contraction ripped through her. She gritted her teeth, biting back a cry. Her mind flashed to Jack, his hands clumsy on her shoulders, his smile the first thing she'd ever trusted. She had given so much to him, her first real love, her secrets, her dreams. Ethan's hand found hers, grounding her in the present. "You're doing great, Megan. Just keep breathing with me. You're not alone, okay?" She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, half from pain, half from the storm of memory. She hated crying in front of him, hated looking weak, but there was no room for pride now, just survival. Outside, rain battered the windows, matching the rhythm of her heart. Ethan wiped her brow with a cool cloth, his touch gentle and practical. In another life, she might have let herself fall into that comfort. But now, she only wanted to make it to the other side. Between contractions, time warped, stretching and snapping. She remembered her last night with Jack, before he knew, how they danced barefoot in their living room, her head on his chest, laughter rising like bubbles in the dark. Promise me you'll never leave, she'd whispered. He'd kissed her hair, never answering. Now, the echo of that silence filled the room. A nurse called for more gloves. Anna pressing on Megan's belly, checking the baby's position. Megan's fear peaked. What if something went wrong? What if the storm kept help from coming? She glanced at Ethan, searching for reassurance. He met her gaze, steady as stone. I won't let anything happen to you or your baby, he said, his voice low, conviction anchoring the chaos. Pain clawed at her again, sharp and blinding. She cried out, the sound swallowed by thunder. The team leapt into action, Anna counting, Ethan coaching her through the pushes, his words measured, soothing, a counterpoint to her panic. Almost there, Megan. You're strong. You've got this. With every surge, she felt the weight of everything she'd carried. Broken dreams, old promises, the ache of being left behind, pressing down. But under it all, a stubborn rhythm grew. The same stubbornness that made her keep going day after day, no matter how uncertain the future looked. At last, Ethan's face changed. A flicker of relief, the hint of a smile. One more push, he said. Megan summoned every ounce of strength, digging deeper than she thought possible. She gripped Ethan's hand, feeling him steady her, feeling her own courage bloom beneath the storm. Then, in a rush, it was over. A tiny cry cut through the chaos, sharp and miraculous. Megan slumped back, breathless, tears streaming, the pain receding like a tide. She barely heard the nurses congratulating her, or the rain easing outside. She only heard her baby, fierce and real, a promise remade in the middle of a storm. Ethan placed the tiny, swaddled girl in her arms. Megan looked down, trembling, as thunder rolled away and the first light of morning crept across the city. In that moment, everything changed. But the journey, the real journey, was only beginning. The world settled into a fragile hush after the storm, as if the city itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Megan cradled her newborn daughter in her arms, staring at the impossibly small hands, the pink mouth opening in a silent yawn. Her own exhaustion ran bone deep, but she couldn't look away. In that moment, the hospital room faded. The pain, the sirens, the awkward chatter of nurses in the hallway, leaving only the simple, stubborn heartbeat of new life. Lily, Megan whispered, testing the name she'd chosen long before Jack left. Lily's eyes fluttered shut again, unfazed by the lingering thunder or her mother's tears. Megan stroked her daughter's cheek with the back of her finger. She had Jack's nose, her own chin. It was both comfort and reminder, a mosaic of everything lost and everything still possible. Ethan lingered by the bedside, rolling up his sleeves, hands steady even as the adrenaline of the delivery faded. The nurses quietly cleared the room, leaving behind a warm hush, the soft beeping of monitors, the first rays of morning leaking through rain-smeared glass. Megan adjusted Lily's blanket, aware of Ethan's gaze. She could feel the weight of unspoken things, questions about the father, about her life, about why she was alone tonight of all nights. But he didn't press. He simply watched her with a patience she both envied and feared. "Congratulations, Megan," he said, his voice quieter than before. "She's perfect." Megan nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She wanted to believe it, to let herself hope that the hardest part was behind her, but doubt clung to her like the cold sheets. What kind of life could she give Lily now? How could she teach her daughter to believe in love, in security, in herself, when those things still felt out of reach? Ethan reached for a chair, pulling it close. How are you feeling? She hesitated, searching for honesty. Tired, terrified, like I'm floating outside my own skin. The words came out brittle, edged with something rawer than she meant to show. Ethan only nodded, as if he understood too well. It's normal. Most people don't talk about how lonely these first hours can feel. His eyes flicked to Lily, then back to Megan. But you're not alone. Not tonight. It was a kindness, simple, no promises attached. Megan glanced down at Lily, thinking of the women in her family who'd weathered storms alone. Her grandmother with her war stories, her own mother scraping by on 2 jobs, never asking for help. Was strength really something you inherited, or just something you learned to fake? The nurse returned briefly to check on Lily, jotting notes, her tone brisk but kind. Good lungs, she said, smiling. You did well, Mom. As she left, Megan exhaled a shaky breath, the room feeling both emptier and somehow lighter. Ethan stayed, tucking his stethoscope into his pocket, scanning the chart, ever the professional. But as he hovered near the foot of the bed, Megan sensed he wanted to say more. Something personal, not medical. For a moment she wondered if he'd mention the past, if he'd ask why she never called, why she disappeared from his life so abruptly. But he didn't. He just watched, letting the silence stretch, careful not to crowd her. Megan broke it first. I'm sorry you had to see me like this. It's not exactly how I pictured us meeting again. He shook his head, a gentle smile ghosting his lips. Life doesn't care much for our plans, does it? That small grace loosened something in her. She leaned back, the pain receding, the weight of survival slowly replaced by something less jagged. Lily stirred in her arms, tiny fists waving in protest at the sudden quiet. Ethan pulled up another chair. You should get some rest. I'll sit here a while if you don't mind. Megan almost said no. Her pride a reflex, the old habit of refusing help. But her eyes drifted closed, exhaustion finally winning, and when she woke sometime later, Ethan was still there, reading over the chart, a soft light spilling across his face. A nurse passed by, offering Ethan a cup of vending machine coffee. Megan caught a snippet of their exchange, something about staff shortages, the chaos of the night, how lucky she'd been. She wondered if it was luck or just another test life had thrown her way. In the quiet moments before dawn, Megan thought about the future, about the nights ahead with a newborn, the rent past due, the piano at home gathering dust. Fear and hope mingled inside her, tangled and inseparable. Ethan finished his coffee, glancing at her with a warmth that steadied her. If you need anything at all, just ask. Megan squeezed Lily a little closer, her voice soft but steady. Thank you, Ethan. I mean it. He nodded, standing to leave. Rest, Megan. You've got a whole new story starting now. As the door clicked shut behind him, Megan let herself believe it. Just for a moment, in the hush after the storm, hope felt real again. Fragile, but alive, resting quietly in her arms. Morning arrived slowly, gray light slipping between slats of hospital blinds, painting soft shadows on the linoleum. Megan awoke to the weight of her daughter asleep on her chest, Lily's breath barely a whisper, tiny hand curled in a loose fist against Megan's collarbone. For a moment, the world was only the hush of early hours, the steady beeping of monitors, and the warmth of new life tucked safely under her chin. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her mind was wide awake. She lay still, letting the memory of the night wash over her. The thunder, the pain, the blur of faces and voices. Most of all, Ethan. calm in the storm, never once flinching at her anger or tears. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Ethan stepped in, this time with a clean shirt and a half-eaten granola bar in hand. His smile was gentle, careful not to intrude, but she felt the difference. The subtle shift in their connection. Not quite friends, not quite strangers. Something new, tentative and raw. "How's Mom doing?" he asked, setting the bar on her table. "Exhausted," she replied, voice hoarse. "But I think Lily slept better than I did." He smiled at the bundle in her arms. "Babies are funny that way. It's always the adults who lose sleep." A nurse came to check Lily's vitals, chatting softly about feeding and swaddling. Megan watched, equal parts grateful and overwhelmed. The nurse jotted notes, then handed Megan a stack of discharge papers and instructions, outlining the rules of newborn life. Feeding every few hours, watching for fevers, making sure Lily gained weight. It all felt dizzying, like a test she hadn't studied for. As the nurse left, Ethan lingered. "Do you have a way to get home? Anyone to pick you up?" Megan hesitated. Her apartment was across town, a third-floor walk-up with a leaky window and neighbors who argued at all hours. Her car was old, unreliable, and after the storm, she wasn't sure she trusted herself to drive anywhere. She hated how obvious her hesitation felt. "I'll manage," she said, but her words rang hollow even to her own ears. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, hands in his pockets. "Megan, listen. My place isn't far from here. I have a guest house out back, private, quiet, plenty of space. Why don't you and Lily stay there for a while, until you get your feet under you?" For a second, pride prickled. Megan opened her mouth to refuse, the instinct to stand on her own 2 feet overwhelming. But the image of her empty apartment, the flickering lights, the unpaid bills, the loneliness waiting behind every locked door, made her pause. She searched Ethan's face for pity, but saw only a quiet steadiness. Not a rescue, not an obligation, just an open door. "Are you sure?" she asked, voice small. "You don't have to." He shook his head, dismissing the protest. "It's no trouble, really. And you know, the garden's a nice place for babies to nap. Besides, the piano in the guest house could use some love." The word piano landed gently, awakening something long dormant inside her. Before she could talk herself out of it, Megan nodded. "Okay, just for a little while." Ethan grinned. "I'll handle the paperwork. We'll get you two settled in after breakfast." The transition felt almost dreamlike. Nurses checking vitals, forms signed, Ethan helping carry Lily's car seat and Megan's duffel bag through the hospital's echoing hallways. The city outside still wore traces of the storm. Downed branches, glistening sidewalks, the metallic tang of wet asphalt in the air. Ethan's car was warm, humming softly as they drove through quiet neighborhoods to his home just north of the river. His guest house sat behind an old brick main house, shaded by maples and lilacs. Inside, sunlight spilled through tall windows, illuminating a small upright piano in the corner and a faded quilt on the bed. There were mugs stacked neatly in the cupboard, a jar of tea bags, a vase of fresh-cut peonies on the kitchen table. It didn't feel like charity. It felt somehow like a place someone had prepared with care. Ethan helped bring in her bags, then quietly excused himself to the main house. Megan wandered the space, Lily cradled against her shoulder, her feet sinking into the thick rug. The piano called to her, old keys, slightly out of tune, but full of memory. She traced the wood, wondering what music might return to her hands, if she ever found the nerve to try. Later that afternoon, As Lily napped by the window, Megan wandered outside. The garden was lush, full of late spring color, and a small swing creaked in the breeze. For the first time in months, she felt herself breathe deeply, as if her ribs had finally loosened. She wasn't home, not yet. But she was safe. That was enough for now. A soft knock at the door. Ethan holding a folder from the local arts academy, a hopeful glint in his eye. "Thought you might want to see this," he said. "They're always looking for music teachers." Megan ran her thumb over the hope necklace, feeling something gentle and new unfurling inside her. Possibility, fragile and bright as morning light. For the first time in months, Megan woke not to the shrill blare of an alarm clock or the rattle of pipes in her old apartment, but to gentle birdsong outside Ethan's guesthouse window. Lily slept soundly in her bassinet, a faint smile on her lips. Sunlight painted moving patterns across the quilt, and for a moment, Megan almost believed this new life might last. Yet as she sat at the small kitchen table, tracing the rim of a mug of tea, doubt crept in like a draft. She looked around, the tidy space, the garden blooming outside, even the upright piano she'd barely touched. Everything felt borrowed, and Megan wondered how long she could stand here before the world reminded her she didn't belong. She spent the next days learning Lily's rhythms, midnight feedings, drowsy afternoons on the porch swing, warm baths in the kitchen sink. Ethan stopped by each morning, sometimes with groceries or a new lullaby for Lily. He never hovered or asked intrusive questions, but Megan sensed he was always a call away. Still, the urge to prove herself gnawed at her. She didn't want to be the woman who needed saving, no matter how gentle the hands that reached for her. When Ethan handed her a brochure for the local arts academy, Megan studied it late into the night. The idea of teaching piano both thrilled and terrified her. What if she failed in front of strangers? What if she was never more than a mother on the run, a woman with a ruined past, and nothing left to give? She rehearsed her answer in the mirror, practicing confidence she didn't feel. On the morning of the interview, she dressed carefully. Black slacks, Lily's hospital bracelet tucked in her pocket like a lucky charm. Ethan offered to watch Lily for an hour, and Megan, too nervous to refuse, handed her daughter over with whispered instructions. The academy building was older than she expected. Creaky stairs, sunlight slanting through dusty windows, echoes of music drifting down the halls. Megan waited in the reception area, clutching her resume so tightly it crumpled at the edges. A few students trickled past, their laughter muffled by heavy doors. At last, she was called into a small office where Mrs. Ballard, the senior instructor, sat waiting. The older woman's hair was neatly pinned, her eyes sharp above half-moon glasses. "Single mother, are you?" Mrs. Ballard asked after the usual questions. The words were matter-of-fact, but Megan heard the unspoken skepticism. "Yes," Megan replied, her voice steady but small. "Music teaching isn't an easy job," Mrs. Ballard continued. "Children are demanding, their parents even more so. And with a baby at home, your commitment?" She left the sentence unfinished, a challenge hanging in the air. Megan's first instinct was to apologize. Instead, she drew a slow breath, remembering all those years she'd played for empty rooms, for anyone who'd listen, for herself when no one else believed. "I understand it's a lot," she said quietly, "but music is what kept me going through the hardest parts of my life. I think I can share that with your students." Mrs. Ballard pursed her lips, unconvinced. "Well, we'll need to see some proof of your skill. Do you have any recent recordings or references?" Megan hesitated, stomach twisting. Her old life felt so far away now, the evidence of her talent lost in another time. I might, she started, but her words faltered. Back at the guest house, she found Ethan in the garden, Lily cooing in his arms. Megan tried to hide her disappointment, but Ethan read it on her face. "Tough crowd?" he asked gently. She managed a half smile. "Apparently being a single mom is a bigger obstacle than I thought." He nodded, thoughtful. "Do you remember the sonata you wrote in college? The one you played at your senior recital?" She blinked, startled. "You remember that?" He shrugged, a small smile at the edge of his mouth. "I never forgot. I might have sent a recording to Mrs. Ballard this morning. Just in case." Megan stared at him, a mix of relief and embarrassment burning in her cheeks. "Ethan, I wanted to do this on my own." "I know," he replied, his tone soft. "But sometimes even the strongest people need someone to remind them what they're capable of." That evening, Mrs. Ballard called. "I listened to your recording, Megan. There's something in your playing. Honesty, resilience. I'd like you to start as a substitute next week." Megan hung up, breathless, heart pounding with something that felt like hope. She watched Lily sleep, the garden humming in the dusk, and for the first time since the storm, allowed herself a small, fierce smile. Sunlight warmed the kitchen table where Megan set down her mug, the faint traces of yesterday's thunderstorm still shimmering on the windowsill. Weeks had passed since she'd moved into Ethan's guest house, and each day brought new rituals. Morning walks with Lily tucked close in her sling, afternoons spent coaxing music from the old piano, evenings watching garden shadows flicker against the wall. For the first time in years, Megan's life beat to a steadier, gentler rhythm. Her first days at the Arts Academy were tentative, marked by awkward introductions and silent doubts. The other teachers had a way of glancing at her, polite but always with a question beneath their words. Was she reliable? Could she be counted on, with a newborn at home? Megan felt the weight of those unspoken judgments. Still, she showed up early, stayed late, and poured herself into each lesson, rediscovering the joy of guiding small hands over black and white keys, coaxing uncertain notes into melody. Music had always been her language for everything she couldn't say aloud. Now, as she played scales for her students or demonstrated a piece, she felt old walls inside her begin to crack. The first time a shy girl named Harper grinned at her after playing Twinkle, Twinkle without a mistake, Megan's heart fluttered, a fragile, electric hope. Between lessons, she listened to colleagues' stories, shared coffee in the staff room, and slowly let herself be seen not as the woman who had failed, but as someone beginning again. Still, she was careful. She turned down invitations to happy hour, offered only vague answers when someone asked about Lily's father, and made sure her vulnerability didn't look like weakness. Ethan remained her quiet anchor, always present, never hovering. On days when her confidence wavered, he'd bring her a new piece of sheet music or share a story from the hospital that reminded her she wasn't alone in feeling lost. Once, when she came home defeated by a harsh parent's comment, Ethan simply made tea and sat with her in silence until the sting faded. But just as she was settling into this new chapter, the past came knocking. One Friday afternoon, as Megan was packing up after a long day, a shadow crossed the doorway to her classroom. She looked up, heart stuttering. Jack. He looked thinner, paler than she remembered, his hair a little longer, eyes tired. He hovered at the threshold, uncertainty written in every line of his body. "Megan," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Her breath caught, old panic and anger rising in her chest. She glanced at the empty hallway, at the photos of students on the wall, at her own trembling hands. Lily's bracelet, her lucky charm, was in her pocket. Megan closed her fist around it. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Jack swallowed, eyes darting. "My mother, she found out about Lily. She says I should try to be a father, step up, He fumbled, searching for the right words. A strange calm settled over Megan. The urge to yell, to cry, to beg for closure, all faded, replaced by a clarity she hadn't known she possessed. She remembered the months alone, the strength it had taken to get through each day, the music she'd rebuilt from ashes. "I'm not looking for a rescue," she said quietly. "And Lily doesn't need a father who's here out of guilt or duty. We're doing fine. We really are." Jack stared at her, a flicker of shame passing through his eyes. He nodded, then looked away, the fight leaving his shoulders. "I'm sorry, Megan, for everything," he murmured. She let the silence settle between them, then nodded once, gentle but firm. "I hope you find what you're looking for." He left, footsteps fading down the hall. Megan exhaled, the knot in her chest finally loosening. That night, as she rocked Lily to sleep, Megan looked out at the stars above Ethan's garden. She thought of all the things she used to believe she needed: apologies, explanations, a perfect plan. But healing, she realized, was simpler and quieter than that. It was saying no when old pain tried to knock on her door. It was letting herself be proud of how far she'd come. As she tucked Lily into her crib and lingered in the hush of the guest house, Megan felt a small certainty bloom inside her. The story wasn't over, but for the first time, she was the one holding the pen. The announcement came in a printed flyer pinned to the bulletin board in the staff room. Annual Boston Memorial Charity Concert, seeking performers. Megan's first instinct was to shrink from the words. She read it twice, heart pounding. That old reflex, the need to stay small, quiet, out of sight, tugged at her. But something else pushed against it. A memory of Ethan's steady hand on her shoulder, Lily's small fingers gripping hers, the fragile confidence she'd found in music again. A week later, Ethan mentioned the concert over breakfast. "I think you should do it, Megan. You'd be amazing." She shook her head, staring into her coffee. "It's been too long. My hands shake. I'm not that person anymore." He just smiled, unhurried and unafraid of her doubts. "Then you'll play with shaken hands. That's the most honest kind of music." She wanted to argue, but in the days that followed, the idea lodged in her mind. She found herself sitting at the piano after Lily's bedtime, fingers stumbling through old pieces, letting muscle memory and longing guide her. Each night, the fear eased, just a little. Sometimes Lily would gurgle from her bassinet, the sound rising above the music like a note of encouragement. When the night of the concert arrived, Megan stood backstage, palms damp, breath shallow. The auditorium was packed. Patients, staff, families, a cluster of her students whispering excitedly in the front row. At the edge of the crowd, Ethan waved, Lily in his lap, both faces turned toward her. Megan's stomach fluttered with nerves, but she held tight to the hope necklace at her throat. She listened as other performers took their turns, a violinist, a children's choir, a nurse singing "Lean on Me" to wild applause. Then her name was called, echoing through the wings. Megan stepped onto the stage, the lights blinding at first. The piano gleamed under the spotlight, familiar and strange all at once. She sat, adjusted the bench, and closed her eyes. For a heartbeat, She let herself feel everything. The years of regret, the nights she thought music had left her, the slow rebuild of trust in herself. Then she began to play. At first her hands trembled, the notes thin and uncertain. She made a mistake in the opening bars, her chest tightening, but she kept going. Gradually, the music found its shape. Megan poured everything she couldn't say aloud into the keys. The grief, the strength, the quiet hope she'd protected for so long. The melody soared, tender and defiant, threading through the hush of the crowd. Halfway through the piece, she glanced out into the auditorium. She saw Lily, eyes wide with wonder, waving a tiny fist in the air. She saw Ethan, his face shining with pride and something deeper. Recognition, belief, love that expected nothing in return. Around them, faces blurred into a sea of support, strangers and friends drawn together by the simple act of listening. As the final note faded, silence hung in the air, a full, echoing pause. Then the applause rose, filling the hall, washing over her in a tide. Megan stood, breathless, heart thundering. For a moment she felt weightless, untethered from the years of shame and loss. Backstage, Ethan met her with Lily in his arms. He didn't say anything, just handed Megan her daughter and squeezed her hand. Steady, grounding. Megan felt something shift, an old wound closing, not because it was forgotten, but because it was finally honored. Later, the concert organizer called all performers to the stage for a final bow. Ethan urged Megan forward. She stood with Lily on her hip, Ethan beside her, facing the audience as one, three people, imperfect but whole in that shining moment. After the crowd dispersed, Megan lingered by the piano. Ethan found her there, silent but smiling. "I didn't do this alone," she said, voice quiet. "You never have," he replied. As they walked off stage together, Lily tucked close between them. Megan felt a new certainty growing where fear had lived. She'd reclaimed her voice, not by erasing her past, but by folding it into her music, her motherhood, her future. The lights dimmed, but the warmth in her chest lingered. She left the auditorium carrying more than applause. She carried herself, whole and brave at last. The days after the concert carried a golden hush, as if the world itself paused to watch Megan settle into her new rhythm. There were thank you notes pinned to her door at the academy, each one scrawled with grateful handwriting. "Thank you for making music fun, Miss Harper. Your song made me feel brave." Parents lingered after lessons, wanting to shake her hand or press a coffee into her palm. The doubts that once circled her each morning now seemed to dissolve in the steady music of daily life. Yet Megan knew better than to believe struggle would never return. Some mornings, she woke heavy with worry, about bills, about Lily's fevers, about the silence that sometimes stretched between her and her own mother. But something had changed. The difference between surviving and living, between bracing for the next storm and trusting herself to weather it. Ethan remained her companion, never crowding her victories or hovering over her setbacks. On slow evenings, he'd appear in the garden, 2 mugs in hand, and sit beside her on the old porch swing as dusk drifted in. Sometimes they talked, about his long shifts, about Lily's newest sounds, about the future. Other times, they just listened to the hush settling over the lilacs, the quiet ease of being near someone who never asked her to explain. One morning, as Megan buckled Lily into her car seat before work, her mother called. Megan's finger hovered, almost letting it ring out. Then, steadying herself, she answered. Her mother's voice was softer than Megan remembered. "Heard you played a concert, Meg. Grandma would have been proud." Megan leaned against the car, heart racing, unsure what to say. I'm sorry I wasn't there, her mother continued. I should have tried harder. The words landed quietly, but with weight. Megan didn't rush to fill the silence. She let it settle, feeling the old ache loosen just a little. It's okay, Mom, she said finally. We're figuring it out, Lily and me. A pause, then. You're a good mother, Megan. Tears surprised her. Megan blinked at the sky, the soft blue of a morning with no storm in sight. Thank you, she whispered. After that call, the days moved forward with gentle certainty. Megan's job at the academy became steadier. Parents now requested her by name. Students giggled outside her door. And sometimes she'd play a song just for herself, letting the music fill spaces she'd thought would always be empty. Ethan's guest house had long since become home. The scent of peonies and sheet music tangled in every room. Lily grew stronger each day, her laughter echoing across the garden, her first wobbly steps drawing applause from both Megan and Ethan, who cheered as if witnessing a miracle. There was no grand declaration, no sweeping romance, just the slow, honest accumulation of small acts. Meals cooked together, stories read aloud. The comfort of knowing help was always just a knock away. Megan thought often of the hope necklace still resting against her throat. Its silver was worn, the script faded from years of touch. Once, she'd clung to it as a lifeline. Now, she understood it differently. Hope wasn't something she wore. It was something she rebuilt every day, in every choice to keep going, to forgive, to reach for kindness instead of retreat. Sometimes at night, she would find Ethan playing quietly at the piano, Lily perched on his knee, their laughter mingling with the music. Megan would watch from the doorway, letting herself feel the bittersweet gratitude of beginnings she once thought impossible. On the anniversary of Lily's birth, friends and neighbors gathered in the garden. There was lemonade and laughter. Ethan at the grill, children chasing bubbles through the grass. Megan stood beneath the maple tree, Lily's small hand in hers, and looked out at the circle of faces. Students, colleagues, Ethan's friends, even her mother, who had driven in from her small town for the day. The sun dappled the tablecloths, and for the first time, Megan felt herself not as a survivor, but as someone woven into the world. A mother, a friend, a musician, a woman whole in her imperfections. As twilight fell, Megan pressed the hope necklace into Lily's palm, closing her daughter's fingers around it. For you someday, she whispered, if you ever need a reminder. There were no speeches, no grand conclusions, just the gentle, persistent unfolding of life, the echo of laughter, the rustle of leaves overhead. Megan looked at Ethan, who met her gaze with quiet understanding. Family, she realized, was not something fixed, but something chosen and tended with care, again and again. In the soft dark, Megan let herself rest, no longer waiting for rescue, no longer defined by absence or fear, but by the quiet courage of hope, renewed each day. Megan's story is not about being saved, but about learning to choose herself again and again, even in the face of loss and doubt. The necklace, once a symbol of abandonment, becomes a mark of hope she's learned to rebuild, imperfect yet enduring. Family, the story gently insists, is not built by blood or obligation, but by acts of kindness, shared burdens, and the small daily gestures that knit people together. Healing is neither loud nor linear. It is made up of ordinary choices, accepting help without shame, forgiving what can't be changed, and finding meaning in new beginnings. Megan's journey reminds us that dignity isn't found in never needing anyone, but in allowing ourselves to be seen, to be vulnerable, and to trust that hope, even when quiet, is always worth holding. Thank you for sharing this journey. If you need a summary, adaptation, or further analysis, just let me know.